Welcome to another episode of The Artsy Raven, a show about writing and publishing with your host, J.F. Garrard.
Welcome to another episode of the Artsy Raven. I'm your host, J.F. Garrard, and today we welcome Lauren L. Garcia. So Lauren has been a storyteller all her life. She started writing down her stories around the age of 12. 2 decades and over 2 million words later, she has shown no signs of stopping. In addition to living in various fantasy worlds of her own making, she earned a BA in English literature and married her high school sweetheart. She currently resides in North Florida with her husband and pets, where she enjoys hiking, weightlifting, kayaking, and dancing at music festivals. So welcome, Lauren.
Thank you.
I'm really excited that we're talking again because we just had a event recently where we did readings for story origins. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you started writing?
Sure thing. As my little bio says, I've always loved to make up stories in my head. I would watch a movie when I was a kid, and I would like it, but there would be things that I would have changed. So I would just sort of tell myself a different story and just change things up. And from that, I kind of went into fan fiction. And from that, I kind of went, as I think a lot of people do, I went to original fiction, which is where I am now. And I like to write because it's just kind of my creative outlet. I have a couple others, but this is the one that stuck the longest. And this is just kind of how I kind of deal with things internally and process things internally, and then try to put it out into the world in an entertaining manner.
Yeah, I hear a child. So the type of genre that you write is romantic fantasy. Like, how do you sort of describe that? And how did you sort of come across it, I guess?
So I kind of slid into that genre. It's what I've always enjoyed writing, but I didn't really have like a name for it. There is some discussion on like the difference between fantasy romance and romantic fantasy and what that kind of, the distinctions between the two. My understanding and kind of how I look at it is my books are mainly fantasy with a very strong romantic element. The stories wouldn't work without the romance, but they're not centered on the romance, if that makes sense. If you were in a bookstore and you were looking for my stuff, it would be in the fantasy section, not in the romance section. But it just kind of, and the romance genre also has certain tropes and things that it follows. My current series doesn't really quite fit those tropes exactly. The next series I'm planning will fit a little bit more cleanly into the actual romance genre itself.
Okay, yeah, I didn't really think much about romantic fantasy and fantasy romance. Yeah, I guess it's the words.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like the second word is like the main genre, and the first one is like the qualifier, I believe. So that, from my understanding, I'm sure there's other schools of thought.
Now, because you write fantasy, you must do a lot of world building, right?
Yeah.
So what are do you have like a technique or tips you can give people on how they can world build?
I try to build the story around the characters. I try to build the world and the story around the characters. And otherwise I kind of get lost in the weeds with figuring out, heraldry and roads and, all these government systems and how they dispose of waste and all that stuff. And it's all sort of important, but I think the main focus should always be the characters and the story and how all that kind of fits together. And for me anyway, if I let myself linger too long on the extraneous details, I tend to lose the story. So I try to just focus on the characters, their goals, their motivations, and how those things and the themes of the story and how those could be enhanced by or reflected in the world building.
So you published a book recently. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what inspired it and why you wrote it?
Yeah, so I have my current series is Catalyst Moon. I started, the first book came out in 2016. I'm on I'm on the last one. It's book 5. It's coming out later this summer. very excited. And what inspired it, I wanted to write something that I could publish. I mean, I've been writing fan fiction for years and writing original stuff for years, but none of it was ever in my mind, good enough to publish. And I just kind of wanted to take that next step, and I felt like I was ready. So I had some characters that I'd written in fan fiction and Star Wars fan fiction, actually, and I created them. They were original characters, and I thought, wouldn't it be cool to bring them to original stuff? And I actually thought, oh, it'll be a little easy because I already have the characters and their backstories. I was wrong. It was so much harder, I think, than it really needed to be. And I don't recommend doing that. But at least for me anyway, it was great. I've learned so much, and I've had a lot of fun. But mostly I learned a lot. The series was a great series to kind of get into indie publishing and figure out the ropes, so to speak.
So tell us a little bit about like the main characters and why you decided to do it as a series, like instead of just one book.
So it was supposed to be one book, and then it turned into 3 books, as often happens with the fantasy novels, and then it turned into 6 books, but I narrowed it down to 5, so I'll take that as a win. So the two main characters are the characters who are in a romance. Kali, she's an atheist mage. She sort of has this like old injury in her knee that kind of prevents her from walking a long time or moving around a lot. So she's kind of like a bookworm and very theoretical, and loves knowledge and loves seeking out knowledge, but she doesn't get to actively do things in the world a whole lot. So in book 1, she decides to travel to see another mage that could possibly help heal her. So on that journey, in my world, mages are sort of kept under lock and key. No one really trusts the magic users, as often happens. So on that journey, she's being escorted by these folks called sentinels, who are sort of warriors with this unnatural immunity to magic. And during that journey, the whole thing goes awry, and she winds up on the road fleeing in terror from these crazy bandit demon guys. She's fleeing with one of her guardians, a sentinel named Stonewall. And Stonewall is a young man who he's had a very rough upbringing, whereas Kali is a bit sheltered and, not quite introverted, but she definitely has been isolated from a lot of people. He's been very much out in the world. He was orphaned at a young age, grew up on the streets. He had a lot to learn. He learned some very hard lessons very young. And and he's also very, very religious. And she's an atheist, like I said, so they clash quite a lot on their beliefs or lack thereof or whatever. And but over the course of the story and the whole series, they fall in love, and a lot of other things happen. And but they were both, like I said, they were original characters I created for my Star Wars fan fiction way back when. Kali was a Jedi. Stonewall was a clone trooper. I don't know how well versed you are in Star Wars lore, but they were kind of inspired by watching the Clone Wars cartoon. And like I said, I thought it'd be super easy to like take these characters, this backstory, and put them into original fiction, and it was totally wrong. But it was a lot of fun, and like I said, I learned a ton, and I do love these characters very much. I've been writing Kali a very long time, and Stonewall too, a bit shorter, but good. I enjoy them. They're great.
Well, like 50 Shades of Grey, right? Started off as Twilight fan fiction too. So
yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's I feel weird saying it because I know that people roll their eyes when they hear fan fiction, and I get it, but I mean, we all have to start somewhere, and this is kind of what I did. So
yeah. So what did you try getting it traditionally published, or how did you get it? Like, how did you think the publishing process was going to work?
So my journey was a little different than a lot of people's. I never had confidence in myself to try to publish it all. Like I was like, no one will ever want this. It'll never be good enough. So I didn't even try. And also back in like 2015 or something, I don't know. It's still, I guess it's still difficult to try published because you got to get an agent, and then that's a whole thing on its own. And then getting the book picked up. It's a whole thing. I know enough to know I never really wanted to try it. I wound up stumbling across a indie publisher called Inkit, and they had like this competition on their website, and I was like, what the hell? So I entered my book and it won a publishing deal. This is back when Inkit was first getting off the ground. I was very, very happy with that. They published 2 books in the series before they changed their business model to an app, some sort of like immersive reading app. And they basically were like, we're not publishing on Amazon anymore. So I was like, that's not going to work. So we unfortunately had to part ways. So I just kind of realized I had to either do trad publishing or do indie publishing. My feelings about traditional publishing hadn't really changed over time. And I came to discover that I really like having control on all aspects of my work and the output of it. So I just jumped into the whole indie thing with both feet and haven't really looked back.
Cool. So how has it been going, like the self-publishing route? Like you have a lot of control over, I guess, everything. You design your own covers and
Oh, I wish. I'm not good. I am not that good. I am learning though. I am learning on I want to eventually design my own covers because they are expensive. And it's yeah, so I know I have a cover artist. She's amazing. Fiona Jade Media, shout out. She's awesome. It is good. It's a lot to learn. It's so much to learn. I told myself that I would give myself like this series, the Catalyst Moon series, to learn on, because I knew it's so daunting. God, it's so daunting. And I'm not really tech savvy. That's the other part of this. Like I didn't know anything about formatting or marketing, God help me. And it's a lot. And I've learned a ton. And it is nice to have that control. It is nice to have the control. Because even as I feel like it takes me forever to get anything out into the world, but I have friends that are trad published, and it takes them, and the time it took them to get 1 book out, I had like 3. And it's just, and even with my snail's pace, it was still, I just don't think I could handle handing a manuscript over and then having it sit in a editor's inbox or something for like 3 years. There's something I could do that.
I was gonna ask you about marketing. But because we had met on Story Origins, and that's one way for authors to market themselves, is sort of to have a reader magnet. So like that's one of the things you do, where you sort of give away a piece of your book, or you give away 1 book or whatever. So what kind of things have you tried? Like, do you do any marketing?
I have tried a few things. To be totally honest, I only really started self-publishing in, like, when I left my publisher, it was the end of 2018, and 2019 was just a horrific year for me on a personal level. So I managed to redo the covers, format, get the books out, get the website up, get book 3 out. But beyond that, there was really nothing, no marketing, because I didn't have the brain space for it, honestly. And of course, then 2020 happened, and again, it was just another terrible year. So I didn't really get to do much there. This year it's going okay. Still difficult. All this is to say, I haven't done a ton of different kinds of marketing, so I don't really feel qualified to speak about it. What I have done is mostly, like you mentioned, Story Origin. I've tried to do newsletter swaps. I've tried to just build my like mailing list to the point where when I do come out with something new, I will hopefully gain some interest. But it's hard to get traction. I have a lot of plans and ideas for when I get book 5, my current thing, when I get that done, because I just kind of needed to get that done before I can really think about anything else. So TBD.
Yeah, I find marketing is like hit and miss. I mean, for one of the anthologies I released last month, we actually hired a marketing person. It was my first time working with someone professional, so it was really interesting to see how and obviously it's really nice to have someone just do it for you, but at the same time, I'm not sure if we're gonna get the ROI back on that, right? Because it costs so much money to do the marketing. Now you've written all these books. Do you have any advice for people starting to write? Because I know all these people, everyone talks about how they're going to finish a book, right? But it's really hard to do it. So can you tell us a little bit about what you think works for you and what doesn't?
Gosh, it depends on the day. I think what ultimately works for me is that I really love doing this, and that love sometimes has to sustain me through very difficult times. You know, low sales or just difficult plot stuff or just, you know, harsh critique or all that, you know, all that stuff that kind of comes at you and tells you like, no, you shouldn't do this, do something else, you're going to fail. You just kind of have to be like, well, I love doing this. And for me, it's always come down to, I would do this even if no one else read it. If I was guaranteed never making any money, you know, I would still be doing this. And I'm very, very fortunate that I get to do this full time. And I really, you know, my family's supportive and I get to kind of make a go of it. And it's like, well, I love doing this. I wouldn't change doing of the thing. So let me, you know, that really is the thing that has to sustain me. You have to kind of find that inner like fire, so to speak, to kind of keep you going, because nothing external is ever gonna, no external validation is ever gonna be enough. It's never gonna keep you going. You have to find it and to find it.
Now you mentioned you do it full time. So was there a difference doing it sort of, I guess, part time versus like suddenly now you have all this time? Like, is it actually harder or is it easier? Because like suddenly you have time to do it, but then like you say, you have to motivate yourself to get out of bed and actually do it, right?
It's, you know, for me, like I'm very routine oriented and very habit oriented. If I I've finally been able to kind of form a routine. It's been such a crazy like year, 2.5, 3, I don't even know anymore. Time is kind of lost all meaning, but it's been a weird time. I'm finally able to get into like a routine, which has been very helpful. And yeah, you know, there are some days where I just can't, and I just kind of sit down and I'm like, just get just one sentence. And it's a low bar, but if I'm able to clear it, I consider it a win.
Oh, so I guess you're going to continue. I was going to ask you what's your latest project, but I guess you're going to keep on writing until your book 5's done, right?
Yeah. So book 5 should be, like I said, should be coming out late August, hopefully. And so my ultimate like creative vision, so to speak, is to have like a lot of stories set in the same sort of universe. I love Star Wars, like I said, and I love the concept of having the one big universe with all the different kinds of things happening, like the MCU is doing as well. I love it. But I want to do it my way because I want to get control of what happens. I want to make my own canon. So the next series I'm thinking will be in the same universe, just set at a later time.
Yeah, I've had people ask me, "Oh, do you have a graphic novel for your book?" I'm like, you know how much that costs?
Yeah.
Find an artist and do it. I would love to have a graphic novel.
Right? If I could draw, I mean, sure, but
Yeah, that's a skill that I don't have. I can do graphic design, but it's not the same as like graphics and actually originally like drawing stuff, right? So where can we find your book and you?
My books are wide. They're everywhere. Amazon, of course, Barnes and Noble, Apple has them. You can go to my website, laloga.com, and that'll give you links to everything. It's laloga, LALOGA.com.
Well, now you were going to share a reading with us. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're going to read?
Yeah, sure.
You can start reading.
Okay. This is an excerpt from book 1 of Incursion. It's the first one of the series. And so I was talking about Kali and Stonewall kind of they were traveling together. Shit happened. Now they're alone, like sort of on the run. And this is one of their sort of adventures. All right. Kali awoke to the whisper of drawn daggers. Had the sentinel decided she was a threat after all? Wan starlight revealed Stonewall, standing several paces away, daggers raised, facing perhaps half a dozen shadowy figures closing around him. Dressed in darkness, the newcomers wore hoods of inky cloth that left only their eyes visible. More shadowy shapes stood at the hollow's edge, blotting out the stars. Get back, Stonewall said. We have nothing of value, and I promise you don't want to cross me. On some unseen signal, the shadows fell upon him. Kali had seen a skilled sentinel in action many times before, but it was different somehow watching Stonewall. She could just make out the sheen of his moving daggers. His movements were powerful and filled with grace, designed for maximum effectiveness with minimum effort. Judging by the other's cries of pain, he got a few strikes in, but for all of his speed and strength, it would only be a matter of time before he fell into the swarm of shadows. This in mind, Kali tried to rise, but someone tugged at the chain between her bound wrists, jerking her away from Stonewall. Something hard shoved her to a kneeling position where she'd lain moments ago. The ground was still warm. The sudden impact sent a lance of pain through her already unhappy left knee, and she bit her tongue to keep from crying out. Fear stole her breath, but pain quickened her fear into hot anger. It buzzed in her ears and made her want to set these shadow attackers on fire, turn their bones to ashes, something, anything. But she could not concentrate when a strange gloved hand gripped her neck, nor when someone yanked her braid to pull her head back, so that all she could see were stars. Something sharp and cold pressed against her throat. The furious lash of Kali's heart almost drowned out the new voice, a woman's. Stand down, Sentinel, the stranger said. Kali caught a flash of hematite as Stonewall turned her way. Release her, he growled, and Tor's name, release her at once. Someone snickered. The woman who'd spoken before hissed a string of words in a language Kali did not know, and the laughter ceased. This mage is far too valuable, the stranger said in a radiant. She's coming with us. She's no mage, Stonewall said, breathing heavily from the fight. Let her go. In response, the strange woman tugged at the chain that bound Kali's wrists. Do you always bind your companion so, afraid she'll run from you otherwise? How in the void did they know I was a mage, Kali thought as the other shadows chortled. Had these strangers overheard her and Stonewall's earlier discussion? Or had they seen a lone sentinel and taken the chance that his companion was a magic user? Either way, the hematite binders confirmed Kali's identity. The strange woman threw back the sleeve of Kali's tunic, exposing her arm to the chill air, and something sharp trailed along her wrist and forearm. Mage, that moon-tainted blood of yours is more valuable than all the gold and hematite in the world, and more effective than Thalo. Kali's mind raced, though it was almost impossible to think clearly, let alone speak. You have a need of a healer. The shadow shifted in place. Yes. Then my blood alone will do nothing for you, Kali managed, forcing herself to speak calmly. I'm more useful to you with my blood inside my veins. I'll help you. Just don't kill me, please. There was a pause, much too long, before Kali heard the shadow again. You swear this, mage? Yes, she whispered. Very well. The blade at Kali's throat disappeared, but the stranger's grip did not relent. I'll take her to the caravan, the shadow said. Get rid of him. Stonewall tensed as the others moved in again, but Kali shook her head. Please don't kill him either. He's with me. He's your captor. What does it matter to you if he dies? Because she faltered, searching for the right words and the right sentiment. Why should she beg for Stonewall's life too? No clear answer came to mind. He's sworn an oath to his gods to protect me, she said quickly. The strange woman laughed. He's done a poor job of it so far. Kali could practically feel Stonewall glowering. Take his weapons if you want, she said, but let him live, please. Another shadowy figure from behind Kali spoke in the same unfamiliar language. Another added his voice, and another, until the lot of them were arguing. Finally, the first speaker, the one who held Kali, barked in order. The others fell silent. When she spoke to Kali in Iranian again, her voice was thoughtful. Very well, mage. Neither of you will be harmed if you cooperate. Stonewall muttered something beneath his breath, but Kali ignored him. Yes, we'll both do as you say, she replied. You heard your charge, Sentinel, the shadow said. Drop your weapons. Stonewall did not move. The knife returned, pressed closer, but this time Kali refused to give in to the thrum of terror that burned behind her eyes. Instead, she tried to find Stonewall's face across the shadows, although she did not know what she thought she'd see within it. Fear, perhaps, or anger. His armored chest rose and fell with each heavy breath as he looked at her. Then his daggers hit the dirt and he lifted his hands in surrender. The shadows made short work of his freedom. They checked him for weapons, took his sword and roughly bound his wrists before shoving him towards the hollow's edge. The strange woman hauled Kali to her feet and urged her to follow. Her knee protested the rough treatment. She stumbled, but the strange woman held her upright and all but carried her up and over the hollow's edge. The instant Kali clambered out, someone drew a dark strip of fabric over her eyes and tied it behind her head. The heavy tread of boots scuffled the grass ahead of her. I will warn you one more time, Sentinel, the shadow said again. Cooperate, or you will not like what will befall your mage friend. Stonewall said something Kali did not catch, but the others laughed. If I'd been able to get more rest, she thought as someone shoved her forward once more, I could do something to get us out of this. But she was still tired, more so than she'd ever been from using magic, and it was all she could do to remain upright. They led Kali along for several paces through the thick grass that tangled her legs. The strange woman muttered a curt order and tugged Kali's chain, forcing her to stop. Before Kali knew what was happening, someone lifted her like a sack of potatoes and plunked her onto a wooden surface. Soma was next. She knew it was so because the others grunted with the effort of lifting him and his armor, and the floor quaked when they dumped him beside her. The thump when he landed had a faint echo. They were in some sort of enclosed space. Kali also could not feel the wind any longer as the air seemed to press closer in a way that reminded her of a mage carriage. More anger swelled in her chest. Well before she'd left Starwatch, she'd been on her best behavior, all in aid of reaching Whitewater City. Like a good little mage, she'd endured being bound and shuddered away like a piece of luggage. She'd lost all of her possessions, including her father's viol, to a pack of Kandera raiders. She'd exhausted herself trying to save her own skin and that of her sentinel captor, who seemed to regard her as a spark that would catch the whole world on fire. And now these monsters claimed to want her blood. This was the final snap and the fraying thread of her patience. If you're going to steal me by the point of a blade, Kali heard herself say, at least tell me your name. No. Footsteps paused before her. Someone lifted Kali's blindfold and she looked around, blinking at the covered wagon. The walls and floor were wood, as was the rear entrance where they'd been brought through. A thick piece of canvas stretched across the top, tied down the corners to provide a makeshift roof in the fashion of the Sufani caravan she'd read about. Kali saw little of her captor, only a pair of narrowed eyes behind the dark hood that obscured the strange woman's face. Stay here and keep quiet, the woman said. Do not try to escape. I will not allow you to see where we are taking you, nor get a sense of our true numbers. As her captor spoke, Kali considered what she knew of such traditions. Oh, so you are Sufani, she said, perhaps a bit too pleased with herself given the circumstances. That explains a great deal. It certainly does. Stonewall had been left lying on his side and now tried to sit upright. A difficult task given his bulky gear and his bound hands. Your kind are liars, cheats, and thieves. And you're willing to add murderers to that list, Kali added, glaring back at the Sufani woman. Sufani's voice was tight, as if her teeth were clenched together. You made a promise, mage. For now, you should be grateful for our hospitality. When Tor crumbles, the sentinel shot back. Hospitality, my magical ass, Kali added, but with no less vigor. She agreed to help them, but not to be nice about it. The nomad ignored them both and slipped out of the caravan, fastening the tarp over the rear entrance and leaving them alone. For a few moments, they sat in silence, and then Kali sighed. Well, shit.
Thank you very much, Lauren, for coming on and sharing your story. So I guess we'll see your next book out soon, and I look forward to that. So have a good day, and we'll speak again later. Okay.
Great.
Bye.
Thanks, you too. Bye.
For more upcoming episodes of the Artsy Raven about writing and publishing, visit us at jfgarage.com/arpodcast. A reminder to Patreon subscribers that there is bonus content available for every episode on the Patreon website. If you enjoyed the show, you can show your appreciation by buying us some digital coffee. The Artsy Raven is produced by J.F. Garrard. The voice in the show's introduction is Chris Gorman, and music is by Tim Moore. Thank you for tuning in. Until next time, stay safe.